Well, hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Ann Herman, and I am one of the co-chairs of the UCAT committee. We are thrilled that Chris and Jennifer and Jenny have been willing to share some of the nuggets. I just asked them a few minutes ago, and there is actually a paper that's tied to the same topic. So if you're curious and want to dig deeper, it is a teacher ed paper, but I think we could all, oh yeah, I see some nods. So some people have already read it, but if you are curious about that, we can reach out to any of them, and they'll be sure to share the citation with us. As you may have remembered when you signed up for this is going to be not only an opportunity for us to learn from these wonderful experts, but also an opportunity for us to interact and really kind of think about how do we bring this to life in our own classrooms or with our own opportunities to work with, mentor, and hopefully grow our students. So again, thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Be sure to reach out to myself if you have any questions about things that UCAT's working on. And we've got this wonderful little QR code if you would like to get involved with some of our student engagement initiatives, specifically the teacher observation program, which we'll maybe have some time at the end of today to speak more in depth about. So thanks again, and thank you to all three of you for being here today.
All right, so I am Chris, when she introduced us. We are here to talk about feedback loops, and we've designed this today specifically to give you strategies that you can use tomorrow, maybe in a week, or maybe down the line. And so we're explaining kind of as we go through the time it takes as well to prep for these. So we wanted to start out with a little bit of humor. So we're gonna have you watch a video clip, and I want you to be thinking about how does this video relate to feedback as we go.
There's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you.
Ow! Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on?
I do believe there's a little bit of reality back there as well. So when you think about that video clip, did you draw any connections to feedback? Have you ever met or talked with a student who you feel like you're being very clear about something and it's very obvious to you, but maybe to the student, not at all? Seeing some heads nod. So that's what, honestly, we are here to talk to you about today, is some of these things that relate to it. So kind of our approach to this is, could one of the reasons or the obstacles to this feedback be, do they understand the purpose of the feedback? And have we done a clear job of establishing that purpose? Or is it that they don't understand how it connects to the course content? You know, sometimes you hear students say, well, this is just busy work. And we might know that it's not busy work, right? But they're not seeing that connection, which is why they use that terminology. Or maybe it's the timing. You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes I've been really busy, so the timing gets delayed, and it's not as effective because they didn't just complete the project, or it's not something they can apply. So we're gonna take you through today and give you an opportunity to reflect on each of these as we go. On your tables, you have a paper copy of a note catcher that we provided. We also have a QR code or a bit.ly here if you would like to access it electronically, however you choose to utilize it or not. But we wanted to provide that for you as we started the presentation.
All right, so we're gonna start with the purpose of feedback. And so we've chunked this presentation into the three sections. So purpose is up first. The quote says, if they're not asking, where am I going? What am I supposed to be learning by doing this? Then feedback is just another set of teacher directions for us to follow. And so we know that when we set a purpose for learning, that student engagement and motivation significantly increase. And in their book, How Learning Works, 7 Research-Based Principles for Smart Teaching, Ambrose and her colleagues go into this in more depth. But essentially, as instructors and professors, when we start the course at the beginning, we have the opportunity to set a really clear purpose for what the goal of the course is, and then to go into depth and detail about how each of the assignments that we've been intentional about creating for our students help meet that goal. And if we do that well, if we're really explicit about that and we paint this picture for them that this assignment gets us closer to this goal, then we've really set them up for success, and they now have a framework where they can monitor their own progress towards the goal, and along the way they're setting their own goals as we do these assignments. But the other beautiful thing that happens when we are very clear about the purpose of something is that gives them an opportunity to tap into their own background knowledge and experiences. And then when we give them this new information, they have something to connect the new information to. And when they have that, they're able to think deeper and then store things in long-term memory. So learning doesn't happen unless it's stored in long-term memory. So we really want to set them up for that. And then the other thing is that if we're clear, they're able to ask great questions and they can get the clarification that they need, which further sets them up for success. So if they have a really clear purpose for the course and each of your assignments that get them closer to that overall goal, then this is where our feedback has purpose. Because if they know where they're going, then when I give them feedback, they know that if it got them closer to the goal. So John Hattie, he says, when you look at all of the variables in student learning, one of the most powerful is feedback. And feedback answers 3 questions. Where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? So as our students sit in front of an assignment, they should be able to say, okay, when I'm doing this task, the impact on my learning is this. When I'm doing this task, this contributes to the overall course in this way. So we really want them to be able to, if they can answer these questions, then we know that our feedback will be meaningful to them. Okay, so with that, in each of these 3 sections, we're going to give you 3 strategies to do or to try. If it has a green dot, you could implement this tomorrow. Yellow might take a little bit more planning, so maybe in a week or 2. Red are those things that are going to take maybe next semester. So here we go. Okay, so the easy, quick one is you're just going to be really explicit about what the expectations of the assignment are, and you could provide a rubric. This is a screenshot of a rubric I have in Canvas. You probably have something similar. And when I roll this assignment out to students, they have to do a journal entry. We look at each of these. So if they get 2 points, they know that in order to get 3 points, I need to just add some more detail. So providing a rubric is great. This one I love. I'm creating a screenshot or a screencast of you explaining the parameters of an assignment. So one, if they miss class that day, they can go back and watch it. So this saves you. But also, they might not be ready to start that assignment that you really unpacked today until the weekend. And so in order to remind themselves of all those important things you gave them, they can go back and watch your recording. And then lastly, provide them with examples that line up to that rubric. So here's a couple of different journal prompts. You could pass these around and they could assess them to see where they fall on that rubric. And you can point out, well, this one has 3 points because. So those are your green dots.
So if you want them to truly understand the purpose, let them create it. right? So when you think about co-created rubrics, this is something I use all the time for like professional engagement in the classroom, or like some of you might refer to it as participation. I've got two different examples up here. I've got one where you've got the 4-point rubric, and then I have one where it's a 1-point rubric. Sometimes I have classes that are very, I don't want to say competitive, but very high achievers, and all they want to do is achieve this exemplary category over here. So to help them get away from, I have to be perfect, I use this one. And then for some of my others in other classes, it's okay to look at the scaffolding. And so it all depends. But one thing that we do in that co-creation, and especially if you have a larger group, I actually have them go around the room. You can do it electronically or you can do it on paper. I've done it both ways. And let's say one of their topics is they want to be reputable. So I have two different groups that are jotting down or corresponding what their ideas are in reference to that. And then we do a synthesis and we combine them after. So that's one way to pull it in and get their thoughts. This year, we did community commitments. So we've done everything from the 6 R's to community commitments to classroom norms. This year, we ended up doing classroom commitments, and we did above the line community commitments and below the line. And that relevance and purpose allows them to have a voice and choice, but it also makes it very easy for me when they aren't meeting a goal that we have set for participation or engagement, or if you're in a face-to-face class, I don't know if you ever battle with technology, phones, computers, right? But I can refer back to this and say, these are the community commitments you set for yourself. These are the expectations you set for yourself. So are you meeting these? And it's their own words, and they created them, so it makes it more relevant for them.
The last thing to think about when you are setting purpose is, I know in my experience at UNO that the first day students walk in, they're very eager to learn about what's going to be happening in the class. You talk through the syllabus, and then you just see glazed over looks. They're completely overwhelmed. They're often wondering, how does what I'm going to be doing align with the course objectives and really my overarching goal? So something that I have found beneficial is on the first day, I give them time to individually just quickly read through the syllabus, but then I actually walk them through this concept mapped. What you're going to see here is this is connected to an undergraduate practicum-based literacy course. So what I really talk them through is, when they walk in here, what can they expect? So I talk through with them in the red, here are the things that we're going to be experiencing every day in our class, so they know when they're walking in, what they can expect as far as the class structure. I also talk them through how the yellow connects to the assignments that they're going to do. So what I want them to see is kind of the gradual release. You're going to walk in, you're going to see me model these things for you. You're going to have opportunities to go out into field and to be able to practice them. And then when you come back from your field-based component, now you have an opportunity to actually demonstrate competency. So it's just a way, I think sometimes it calms their nerves a little bit to be able to talk through and see the connection between what we're doing in class, what they're going to do in field, and what the expectations are as far as assignment criteria. But it's also a way for me to show them how everything links together, so they see the purpose and connection between what I'm going to be asking them to do. Something else to think about, this is more connected. It can easily be used in undergraduate or graduate courses, but we all know that the digital learning team here at UNO has done an exceptional job of creating frameworks for us to utilize as we're trying to make our courses more accessible. And one thing we have to constantly think about is, how are we making sure that students understand what the expectations are? So in my graduate course, I use more of kind of a flipped classroom approach. So as they approach modules, they have an opportunity to kind of look at, here's the overview of what I'm going to be accomplishing, here are the objectives, and then here are the things that I'm going to be completing to meet those objectives. They then revisit that at the end of the module after completing those tasks to kind of assess and do some individual reflection as to how they met those objectives. So again, we just want to constantly think about what spaces and opportunities are we creating for students to see the purpose and the connection between the course objectives and what we're asking them to do.
the microphone. Okay, so we just want to give you a couple minutes while you're in this space to talk to a neighbor or two about how are you currently communicating the purpose for tasks that you have in your courses with students, and how are you making those tasks and assignments relevant and purposeful to students. So we're going to have you share for a few minutes, and then we'll come back together. All right, thanks for all of that conversation. In just a few seconds, we would like you to capture on your note taker. What is something that you might want to try new next week? That would be a today. And then something you might want to put a little bit more thought and planning into, something you might want to try in a future semester. So a someday. And then we'll jump into delivery. Nope. Yes, delivery, yeah.
If you are still writing, you can continue to write and finish up your thoughts. I'm going to move on, as Jenny had mentioned, to delivery. And so how can we vary the delivery of feedback structures to support student reflection? So we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can do that. The instructive is going to be the quickest, collaborative, and then we're also going to talk about facilitative. These come from the new Teacher Center, but we've also got them organized in order of what is going to take the shortest amount of time versus the longest amount of time to complete.
Okay, so instructive structures are when students are unaware and they need you to tell them. They need explicit feedback, and you can do that written or verbal. This is probably what most of us do most often. It's what we naturally do. So we tell them what's missing or what we like about it or what they should do more of. It's either positive or negative, affirmative or corrective. You can do it. There's a written version, I think. So like on Canvas, you probably type your comment, you enter the points into Canvas, and then you write your thoughts about it. So in this example, I'm telling them, here's what I didn't see. There was no results and findings, and so this results in a deduction of points. So that would be a written version, but also it can be paper and pencil too, like Dr. Frieda, who's in the room, we go out into the field and we observe teachers teaching, and he handwrites his notes, scans it, and emails them to them. So it can be actual written or it could be typed. And then verbal feedback in Canvas, there's a feature where you can just speak your thoughts into it, which I like because then they can hear your tone of voice. But you could also do a screencast as you're maybe scrolling through some slides that they've created, and you can comment and give them feedback that way. But instructive is instructor-led, and we're just giving them explicit direction.
So the next one is collaborative, and as you can imagine with the term, this is going to be less directive, and both the faculty member and the students are really going to have an equal voice and participation in the process. One thing we have to think about as we ask students to provide feedback to one another, how to move them past the I like that or good job. Because if we want the feedback to really influence their decision making and their performance, it has to be specific enough to help them do that. So something that, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, is, again, coming from a practicum-based world. And when we moved into COVID times, we weren't allowed to be in field. So one thing that we did on campus is that we engaged our students in micro-teaches, really provided a specific topic, and asked students to kind of perform to each other, teach to each other, and then provide each other with feedback. After the first round of micro-teaches, the feedback that we got from students was, it wasn't as beneficial because my peers weren't able to give me specific guided feedback. They didn't know how to support one another in that process. So as we moved forward, we were intentional in giving them questions to guide their observation. So we know as faculty members and instructors what we're looking for. Students don't always know. We have to make the unconscious conscious. So we give them guided questions as a way to kind of facilitate their observations. But more importantly, we gave them language. So thinking about how we might use language frames and sentence frames in an environment to support students in giving each other that feedback. We've now done this numerous times since 2020, and this is really something that we talk about and model with them before we actually move them into that micro-teaching process. So if you're right now experiencing challenges with having students give each other feedback, it might be connected back to them not having the language to be able to support one another in the process. So you might think about how you could utilize these in your space.
Which takes us to facilitative. So the instructive, you're the most involved. Collaborative, they're working with each other. Facilitative is where you're taking more of a back seat and either letting them lead it or deepening their reflection through some guiding questions or guided feedback as you go. So when we look at facilitative feedback, what we're going to do today is we're actually going to model how you could do this with your students, but we're going to actually have you apply it to what you're talking about and hearing about today. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to notice that sometimes when you're trying to facilitate the conversation, giving them a reflective structure to work from can be really beneficial. So giving them, as Jennifer had mentioned, some sentence stems if they're working with each other, but also if you're trying to get them to reflect on a deeper level, giving them some things like describe what's happening, okay? What feedback structures do you currently implement to engage students in self-reflection, okay? Now, what's next? We need to analyze it. So let's dig into that a little bit. How do you vary the modes in which you give feedback? Is it all the same way? Do you do it in a variety of ways? And then reflect on that. So now I've looked at how I've done it. Are those methods effective? How do you know, and what would you like to do differently? So sometimes giving them a structure which within or where the questions can go within for that reflective piece can be beneficial. So we're going to let you have some time to talk with your partners about these questions here. All right, I'm going to pull you back. Give you a moment to jot down some of the good ideas you heard on the Today and Someday. If you are still writing, you can continue writing. This time, though, I'm going to ask for some of the ways that maybe you vary the delivery. And I actually just leaned over and asked Todd if I could call him out on something because he was talking about a way that he allows himself to be vulnerable to the students, which can really add to you being able to facilitate discussions and that relationship in the class.
Yeah, so I have a lot of first semester freshmen. I'm an 8 a.m. Monday morning, so I'm the first person they see. And so what I do after exam one, and I teach anatomy, so it can be very overwhelming. So after the very first exam, I have them do a little discussion board, and I ask them, what did you learn from exam one? And I'm not talking about content. What did you learn in terms of how to prepare for a college exam? The second question I ask is then, how can I do better? To kind of show them it's a two-way street. I'm here to help you. And then the third question I ask is, what can you do better next time? Kind of allowing them to write down an action plan so they have it in front of them and they know moving forward what to do for exam 2, 3, etc. So I found that to be kind of helpful. They have really good ideas, but they don't always pull through, but it's a start. So.
That's good.
That's reality, though, right? I know I have great goals, like at New Year's. I don't always follow through on them either. Other ways that you vary up delivery methods, or something that you want to share or that you heard? Because I thought that was a great example of a way to do it. Other thoughts? I was going to say, I have incredible wait time, just so you all know. I was going to say.
Well, I was actually thinking about this more at the point of instruction. I'm super passionate about feedback. It's one of the things that is a passion project for me as an educator. But I find it just as interesting utilizing techniques at the point of instruction as I do giving feedback on work that's already been submitted, in that it gives us an opportunity to produce the space that we want for students for discussion in a classroom. And I was talking to Dr. Gomez-Johnson here about one of my favorite techniques. When a student asks me a question expecting me to respond and, you know, sort of settle the social interaction, one of the most powerful techniques that I've used is to just ask back, well, what do you think about that? And that invites them into the space. It establishes that student thoughts are useful within the class, and that there's often a lot of self-blame that can exist with students, or a lack of confidence, and just helping them to show themselves that they have worthy thoughts to contribute to a classroom environment is a big part of what we do.
Other thoughts? Here's the thing, like what I would say to my students is you're all doing great things, whether you recognize it or not, right? So you may not want to share, but there's great things happening, I guarantee it.
So we've talked about purpose. So we know in order for our feedback to be meaningful for students, they need to understand why they're completing the task. We've talked about delivery, so thinking about how we vary the modes in which we offer feedback. We also need to consider the timing. So with feedback, our ultimate goal is to enhance students' strengths, to potentially also adjust and address areas of growth. We also know that we're looking to build this repertoire of strategies connected to their content or their discipline. But we also have to recognize in order for those things to happen, we have to be really intentional and consider the timing of our feedback, because timing has a strong impact on students' ability to use it to enhance or increase their performance, whether it's instructionally or in the field. So what we want to think about is there are really two different types of feedback. There is deferred feedback, in which students complete a task, they go through the entire process to completion, and then we provide feedback. The feedback may not necessarily impact their ability to increase performance on that task, but hopefully they can take it with them to increase performance on the next. But then there's also times where we want to provide immediate feedback. That is when students are engaging in maybe an undesired behavior, again, coming to you from a teacher ed lens. So instead of waiting until after they taught the lesson, we address it right there, either through modeling or we give them language to support students in the process. So my example for you, kind of out of teacher ed, would be to think about when we are supporting our students in using correct APA format. If we let them engage in that task incorrectly 10 to 15 times, it's really hard to unlearn that behavior, because now I've done it wrong that many times. So we really want to think about, if we're going to ask students to engage in the same process or the same task over time, multiple times throughout the semester, how do we provide immediate feedback after the first time to support them as they move forward in the process? So I think we also have to recognize, though, our space and our time and capacity as instructors. We are doing 1,000 things, so it can be really overwhelming when we have an influx of assignments coming in, and we know it's really important to provide that feedback, but man, time for us to give them meaningful feedback can be really hard and challenging. So one thing that I really have thought about over time is how to stagger assignments and grading throughout the semester. So especially when I'm doing project-based assignments, and I want them to be able to learn from the experiences and work of others, I will set them into performance groups. They will then kind of work together to decide who's potentially going to be submitting first, to potentially who's going to be the fifth one that goes. What that also does is it fosters choice in the environment, which which we know is going to increase engagement. I not only get to maybe choose my topic, but I get to choose the when. And it also helps us recognize that just like us in our busy lives, students are the same when they leave our classrooms. So allowing them to kind of look at their personal and professional calendars to see what works best for them is also going to be beneficial. But by staggering assignments, I'm able to then go through smaller chunks of students at a time, provide, this probably is more deferred feedback, and that I'm providing feedback for them that's going to enhance their performance on other assignments. But because I have fewer to grade, I have more opportunities to provide more meaningful feedback. So just simply thinking about the structure in which we provide feedback and opportunities to give students information about how their performance is going.
Chris.
Conversation checkpoints. So Todd mentioned giving the students a voice in the room. Michael mentioned making sure that they know that their opinions, their voice, and their thoughts are valid and just as important as ours are. So one of the ways to do this is through conversation checkpoints. So Anne, I know you were talking about this at the beginning. She was talking about it through like 100% online class. And sometimes with that, people can give a little pushback because it's supposed to be online, I don't want to talk with you, right? And so establishing up front, this is what it looks like, right? If you are in more of a remote, like an 820 section, you can set those parameters when you start as well as if you are face-to-face. But my suggestion would be, if you are in that 820 or in that face-to-face 801 section, doing it within your course time. It can be a 10-minute conversation, and you can learn more about that student in 10 minutes than you have all semester in every single assignment they've had. Now, if it's a bigger class, like when Jenny and I put our groups together, we have nearly 80, right? And so trying to get feedback from just us can be really hard. But when you think about using GA support or TA support, using small groups to get a pulse on what's going on, or you could even group the students based on the needs you're seeing at that point in time so that it can be a really focused conversation. But sometimes those smaller groups or that one-on-one can mean the difference to a student. We've actually seen an increase in feedback into the course evaluations because we've started to implement some of this. And so sometimes that one-on-one conversation can be very powerful. Making sure they know it in advance, clarifying that is extremely important. Or even what I've done before with my 100% on Zoom, when we were all on Zoom for everything, giving them options. And then kind of tracking who's coming to me voluntarily, who do I need to talk to that's not volunteering to talk to me, and then I can be strategic about that as well.
Okay, and then lastly, we don't have to be the only one in the room giving feedback. Our students can give each other feedback, and it can be really powerful. One, it's a time saver on you. I can't give the amount of feedback that I want to give to students based on my schedule, so let's be smart about it. So here is an example. In one of my classes that I teach, the students have to write an annotated bibliography. So what you're looking at on the right is the left column of the right picture is the criteria that needs to be in each section of their annotated bib. And then when we're halfway through the semester, they get together with a peer and they give each other feedback on each of these sections. So I've given them a structure, but like Jennifer talked about before, then I provide them with sentence stems. So this is called tag. They can tell something that they liked, ask a question, or give a suggestion. And then it gives them something to start with. So this is just to show you, there is no way in one class period I could give every single student this amount of feedback. So one, they're getting quantity, but then if you go to the next slide, it's actually really good quality feedback, and it's not coming from me. So in the introduction, it needs these parts, and the student said, do you think that adding one more sentence to address the third bullet would help? Great question. And then down in the main body part, they're telling what they liked. The logical progression throughout the body was supported by multiple studies, and the conclusions that were made, both positive and negative results were provided. Super great feedback. And it didn't come from me. But I created the space where it could happen, and the students then benefit from that.
So we're going to have you discuss with a partner, when do you use deferred versus immediate feedback? Which have you found impacts learning more and why? And what strategies do you use? So go ahead and turn and talk with your groups about that. Let's go ahead and, before we kind of share out as a group, when you think about timing, what's something that you could do today that might impact the students that you have this semester? And what's potentially something that you need to think about as you look into the spring semester, which is already November. Nobody's freaked out about that, but I am. So go ahead and just simply write those down, and then we'll take some time to kind of talk about what you're doing as far as timing. As you're working, a great conversation happened about kind of the difference between deferred and immediate feedback, and when would one be preferred over the other, and just thinking about that. So often we use a deferred approach where students complete an entire project. After they after they complete the project, we provide feedback. That feedback isn't necessarily going to increase their performance on that task. We really want it to be feed forward that they can take with them into other assignments. That's deferred. But what we want to think about is if we want to directly impact students through the process of that project, how do we provide immediate feedback? Is it through checkpoints? Is it through peer feedback? Is it through ungraded submissions where they submit pieces of what they're doing? We provide feedback to help them immediately make changes as they go through the process. So that's kind of really the difference between the two. Does anyone want to give us an example of how they are considering timing as they are providing feedback to students? Maybe either a deferred or an immediate approach that you're using that is effective.
Something that you like doing, that works for you.
We talked about using in-class response systems and how that gives super immediate feedback, which can be great because it kind of catches their thought process if they're going down the wrong path and helps to correct it right there in real time.
Right. It's hard to fix behaviors if students have done them repeatedly. So if we can provide feedback immediately to help correct the undesired behavior and move forward, it's going to save us time when we go to provide feedback at the end, but it's also going to help students experience more success, which is the goal. Anything else, Michael?
I should talk about the box of safety. I try to take every opportunity I can to talk about the box of safety because it's been highly successful for me. And so I teach adolescent development, which has a lot of historical weight for everybody. And there are, of course, lots of aspects of identity intersections that are impactful for people, and that can be very, very difficult to discuss in a classroom environment. So a great way to get people to discuss while simultaneously training professional educators in combination together with themselves is they write stories or ask questions that they've always been wanting to get off of their back or that they've always wanted to ask into the box of safety, and then we have a communal response to that question. And it results in a lot of, oh wow, I didn't think that this was the female presenting experience before, and oh wow, I didn't really think about the fact that some of my queer friends had this experience. And so that kind of like mutual anonymous feedback has been really useful for challenging topics.
So our time is really coming to an end, but I think maybe what we'll kind of end with is a takeaway. So we have really provided a variety of strategies, but maybe turn to your shoulder partner and tell them what's one takeaway, one thing that maybe you can go ahead and try to implement next week with students. So go ahead and turn and talk about that.
I just want to thank everyone for coming. We appreciate you being here. I know we're at time. The three of us will be available after if you want to talk about anything, or if you want to stay and talk with each other, feel free. But thank you so much.
I want to say thank you. I always learn something every time I listen to you all, so thank you. They're my colleagues and from my department, so yay, teacher ed. Thank you all for coming. There's a little evaluation sheet. If you want to fill that out, you can leave that at the back table, or you can take the QR code and fill that out. Like Ann said earlier, the Scan Me is our current student engagement initiative, which is signing up for a teaching observation with colleague, and it's incentivized $300. So it's a way to get a little PD funds. And I just want to say kudos to UCAT. There's some UCAT members in the audience here. Wave if you are a UCAT member. They've been really working on student engagement initiatives, and you're seeing that in the back of the room. The students who are filming, and the equipment that they're filming with was purchased through student engagement grants last year. And so it's a way to get students actively engaged in their discipline. So kudos to our students as well. Have a great weekend.